Hello and welcome. My name's Chris Moses, and for the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to be taking you through the topic of recruitment and induction. A little bit about who I am, first of all. I'm Managing Director of a small personnel consultancy based in the East Midlands, and we currently provide HR advice and support to a number of county associations and also town and parish councils. Now, recruitment and induction. First of all, let's be clear, there are all sorts of resources available. There's a lot of information out there on how to recruit and conduct interviews. And I don't intend to repeat what's already available. What this session will focus on is the particular challenges faced by town and parish councils when they try to recruit people, and hopefully how to overcome those difficulties. There's no question that there are skill shortages at present. It can be difficult to fill some posts, and retention is another problem that many face. It's not uncommon for a council to say to me, we've had 3-4 people filling this post in the last 10 years, and we just can't get anyone to stick. So what I intend to look at is 1 or 2 steps the council can build into its recruitment process to address those difficulties. One of the first questions I ask a council when they come to me with this issue is stop a minute and think about, what does your council need? Every council is different, the challenges, problems that it faces. So why have a generic job advert, person spec, job description, when actually what you need is something quite unique? Think about the criteria that make up this job. Qualifications, for example, if it's a clerk, do you need somebody with SILCA? Do you want somebody with strong financial capabilities, such as having AAT qualifications? If it's a member of the ground staff, do you want somebody with a spraying certificate, chainsaw certificate? What sort of work experience are you looking for from your recruits? Are you looking for somebody who understands the public sector, who can understand how district and county councils work? Are you looking for somebody who really understands your parish, who can get under the skin of the community, knows what difficulties and challenges it faces, and can deal with them? All of these are perfectly relevant criteria and are very specific to the needs of your council. Most importantly as well, they're also non-discriminatory. They're objective, they're focused, and they're quite measurable. So the next question I put to a council is, draw up your wish list, draw up that list of criteria, but who's going to do it? Now, the default position for all management of the parish council is the full council. The full council is responsible for all elements of employment, and that includes recruitment. So is the full council going to draw up this wish list and carry out the recruitment process? Well, think about the practicalities of that. Are all elected members going to squeeze themselves into an interview room to carry out the job interviews? Might be a little bit impractical. For that reason, you may wish to delegate responsibility to a subcommittee. Fine, makes perfect sense, practical sense, but in doing so, make sure that they have the proper authorization to do what they are going to do. Make sure that there is a formal resolution that delegates that responsibility, and also that they're given clear and unambiguous terms of reference. A couple of examples I've put on the slide there, that they are responsible for all elements of recruitment to the post of clerk and deputy clerk. Obviously, if it's a clerk, the full council has to approve the appointments, but the recruitment process would be managed by this committee. The committee is responsible for advertising, shortlisting, conducting the interviews, and deciding the outcome, of course, with the exception of the clerk. And it has a budget to enable it to do these activities. So let's go back to our wish list. We now know who's going to do the recruitment process, whether it's full council or a subcommittee. We now know also what that wish list is. That list of criteria has been drawn up, and that creates what is technically referred to as the person specification. That is a unique list of characteristics that your council needs. Now, it could be quite simple. There's no need for anything too elaborate. You could just list the qualifications, the experience, the management skills that you're looking for. You can develop that further to have a list of essential and also desirable qualifications, skills, experiences that fill the needs for your council. But what we're creating here is that person spec. And let's say it contains a list of 10 different criteria. What that then helps us to do is carry out all other elements of the recruitment process, from the advertising to the shortlisting to the final decision. That person spec is going to be the cornerstone of this whole process. So let's just look at the job advertisement for a minute. There are certain elements that have to go in there. No question about it. You've got to say what the post is. You've got to say who the employer is. And what people are probably more interested in is how much does it pay and how many hours. So those are essentials. The next essential is a description of actually what you are looking for. And this is quite important. If done properly, it will help people to self-select so that it will either really appeal to them or stop people wasting their time and your time. So we go back to the person specification, and we could include elements such as the council is looking for a SILCA qualified clerk with experience of public sector working, who has however many years of managing a team of operatives, of office staff, and who can work in a challenging environment with the public, local councils, and elected members. Also, the job advert needs to explain to people how to apply for the position, whether it's by CV or application form, and also, if they want to chat to somebody to find out what the job entails, who they need to contact. So that's our job advert. We've drafted it. Next question, where are you going to put it? Common answer to that is on the parish notice board and on the website. Okay. And how well does that work? We've struggled a few times to get applicants. Maybe worth thinking a little bit about where is going to be the best place to advertise this job. For example, if you really need somebody with local government background, is it worth speaking to the district council, the county council, and asking them if they're prepared to put your job advertisements on their vacancies round robin? If you are looking for somebody who understands how the parish works, are elected members involved in other community groups? And would they be prepared to take your advert along to them and ask anybody there if they're interested? So there are a number of different options that the council can consider when thinking about where to advertise. Don't just stick to old, tried, and maybe not so trusted methods. So we've got our job adverts, we've it somewhere where it's going to attract the right people, and we start to get some interest. We start to get application forms, CVs, whatever it may be. The next thing to do is to shortlist, to decide who are we actually going to appoint. And I said the person spec was the cornerstone of this process. We are going to use that now. What we are going to use that person spec for is to create a tick list of criteria that any applicant must have. I put an example on there: education, experience. Go back to the person specification, use it to assess the application forms, put a tick against each of the criteria as you find them on that application form, and obviously the person with the most ticks are going to be invited to an interview. That's the simple way of doing it. You may wish to be a little bit more sophisticated and allocate points to each of the criteria. So for the sake of argument, if you've got 10 criteria, you allocate 100 points in total, 10 points each. And anybody who's got one of the relevant criteria gets a tick, 10 points. And then you total them up at the bottom and they get a score out of 100. Word of caution here, if the highest scores you get are around 40 or 50, I would suggest, and it's just my suggestion, don't go for settling for the best of the bad bunch. These are people who you can appoint, they will get the job, but if they've not got the skills, if they've not got what you're looking for, they may not settle in, you may not want to keep them. So my advice is set yourself a pass mark. If you've given 100 points in total, let's say a pass mark of about 60 out of 100. So anybody who gets 60 or more is in consideration for an interview. Let's go back to these points again. Let's make them a little bit more sophisticated. So we've got a list of 10 criteria, but maybe some of them are more important than others. You may particularly want somebody with good financial skills. You may particularly want somebody who understands how the parish and the community works. So out of that 100 points, you may allocate 20 or even 30 points to that particular criteria. That reduces the number of points available to other criteria, but make sure that when you total them up, somebody who has got what you particularly are looking for is more likely to be at the top of the list. So we've got our application forms in, we've assessed them, we've given them a score, and each application form now has a score out of 100. If you've set a pass mark of, say, 60 out of 100, hopefully you've got a body of people who've passed that and who have the skills, experiences, and abilities that you're looking for. My recommendation is to pick maybe 3, most 4 for an interview. So the top 3 or 4 would then be invited to that interview. People who haven't achieved that are obviously going to be disqualified from the recruitment process. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the interview process. As I said at the start, there's lots of information out there on practicalities of how to arrange seating, lighting, comfortable work environments, etc. What I do want to just mention are 2 important considerations. First of all, when you invite somebody for an interview, make sure that it's conducted during the normal working hours for that post. I appreciate that if councillors are involved in the interview process, there can be difficulties fitting it in around working hours. And doing the interviews in an evening may be convenient for councillors. But if that's on an evening that doesn't meet when you normally have your council meetings, say if you do the interviews on a Monday night, but the councils normally meet on Wednesday, then it's outside of normal working hours. And somebody could object to, I have other commitments, caring commitments, I have disabled family members I look after, and I need to be there on a Monday evening. So doing it outside of the normal working hours could potentially exclude people with things such as caring responsibilities. So be a little bit careful about that. Another consideration is, where do you do it? Now, it's got to be somewhere confidential. It's got to be somewhere free of interruptions. And doing it in the parish hall, the community centre, may be convenient, but is the phone going to ring? Are workers going to be popping in and out? Are members of the public going to be popping in for whatever? If you haven't got somewhere that you know is going to be free of interruptions, is going to be confidential, then look outside. It may be that district council have meeting rooms that you can hire for a morning to do these interviews, provides you with a professional environment, totally confidential, and also parking available on site. So let's look at questions to ask through the interview process. Well, these questions are going to be based on those criteria, that wish list, that person specification. So I've already mentioned things like education, IT skills, people management skills, local government knowledge, previous work experience. Your questions are going to be focused particularly on those criteria and those criteria alone. So I've put examples here as to what training or qualifications have you received to do this type of work. They're open questions. They're inviting the interviewee to explain themselves and to provide you with their account of how they would answer that question. You're not using closed questions such as, do you have SILCA or not? So it's an open question that enables the candidate to express themselves, and even if they don't have SILCA, to give you a reason why what they do have is possibly as good as what you are thinking is necessary. Another question about experience within the public sector. Where have you worked and how relevant is this to you being able to do this job? Now, you'll see the comments box under there. The interview is going to be conducted by more than one person. If it's the councillors who are doing it, if it's the clerk who is doing this recruitment process for subordinates such as ground staff, office staff, they could probably do it one on their own. But if councillors are involved, such as for recruitment of the clerk, deputy clerk, as I mentioned at the start, by a subcommittee, it's got to be by that committee. No one individual councillor can carry out interviews on their own. It's a legal requirement referred to as the Hillingdon Authority. It goes back to 1986, and it's a decision made by the House of Lords. It states that no individual councillor can exercise managerial authority, and that includes the employment process. So no one councillor can do any element of the employment activities of a council, including carrying out interviews. It must be by a delegated subcommittee of 2 or more, as I referred to earlier. So we have a subcommittee. My suggestion is, if you've got to have at least 2, then have 3 people doing the interviews, which will help overcome a split decision. So you have 3 members of the council or the subcommittee interviewing people for the job. They're going to be given a question sheet with these questions on it and a comments box underneath. Please be careful what you put in the comments, because any applicant can ask to see this information under a subject access request. Anybody can write to the council and say, can you please provide me with all the details of the recruitment process, including your scoring, etc., for me personally. And if you've put unacceptable comments on there, like why would you wear that tie for an interview, then it doesn't look well. It may backfire on the council. So you put your interview question list. They're based on the criteria that you need to fill this job. You also then need a marking form, and the marking sheet is exactly the same criteria: education, experience, IT skills, people management skills, local government knowledge, and scoring. I've given an example of here of between 0 and 5 for each criteria. It's the same process as was used for shortlisting. I've here got a total of 8 different criteria with 5 points each, total of 40 points. And it's simply a case of scoring each candidate against each of those criteria so that you get a mark out of 40. The obvious answer then is the person who scores the highest is the person who gets the post. Now, when we did the shortlisting, we had a pass mark of 60. When it comes to the interview, you know that whoever you are interviewing has at least got 60% out to achieve the criteria that the council is looking for. So there's no need now to set another pass mark. If you've got somebody who has scored the highest, and in this case, it's out of 40, then they should be able to fulfill what the council needs. And what this has done is it's focused very heavily on the needs and the requirements of your council, which means that the person that you appoint has got the skills, has got the interest, has got the requirements that the council is looking for. And also, we've used a set of criteria that are non-discriminatory, they're objective, and they're measurable. So we found our recruit. If it is for the post of clerk, as I say, the next position, next event is to put your recommendation or the committee's recommendation to the full council to get it approved. If it's for a junior position to the clerk, such as deputy clerk or RFO, the committee themselves may be able to make the decision. So we write to our candidate, say, congratulations, well done, you are the person that we want. Please turn up 9 o'clock Monday morning and we will do an induction. Now, inductions are something that unfortunately don't always get treated with the importance that they need. A good induction process is essential to impress upon that new recruit just how important they are, how valued they are, and how it is essential to get them settled in right at the start. And to do that, I've produced a checklist here, which will hopefully help to achieve that. And on that checklist, I've got things like whoever does the induction, and remember, if it's councillors who are doing the induction, it exercises management responsibility, it's got to be at least 2 or more. First thing they do, explain how the organisation works. Who are the key people? Who are the committees? Who are the councillors? Where does everything exist within this council? Where do the workmen keep their tools and equipment? All these practical elements so that the new recruit can hit the ground running. You're obviously going to give them a copy of the job description and go through on there what they feel confident about doing, but also where they may be not so confident, may require a bit of support or additional training. Written terms and conditions of employment, the employment contract. Since April of 2020, it is now a legal requirement that that contract is issued on day 1. The P45, payroll, getting them set up on payroll, again, it's important for that person that they get paid on time, and it tells them that you are taking this seriously. Entitlement to work in the UK, it still surprises me how few councils do not have copies of every employee's entitlement to work in the UK. And what I mean by that is the obvious things are their passport or the birth certificate, or if they're an EU citizen, their settled status. There are other pieces of evidence that can be used to prove somebody's entitled to work in the UK, and that's available on the government website. But it is a requirement. Anybody who starts on day 1, they need to bring that evidence with them. It's photocopied in front of them, it's handed back to them, and the photocopy is kept on their personnel file. And the same thing applies to every other employee of the council. Have you issued them with personal protective equipment? What I mean here is things like for ground staff, visors, gloves, footwear, etc. Not necessarily riot gear for the clerk to attend the council meeting. Health and safety. It's essential that they know what to do if there's an accident, who are the first aiders, where the fire escapes are, what the evacuation process is, when they can have breaks and where the break facilities are. Training needs assessment. Since April of 2020, it is now essential to include on every employment contract a list of what training will be provided as part of the probation period. So things like health and safety training. Okay, so that's a checklist of things to cover on day 1. Induction training program is another essential piece of paperwork that you really need to have. What this does is demonstrate that the new recruit, any employee for that matter, has been taken through what makes up their job, and do they understand how it works, and have they got the confidence and ability to do that? Do they understand how the fire evacuation procedure works? Do they know who the first aiders are? Have you shown them manual handling? And this can also apply to office staff. I have encountered personal injury claims by office staff who've suffered injury through lifting heavy boxes of files or trying to lift files up using step ladders to put them on top of filing cabinets. If they're doing any lifting, they need to have the proper manual handling training. PPE, personal protective equipment, I've already mentioned. Do they know where the toilets are? Do they know where to have a break and when to have a break? And do they know how to use the tools and equipment to do the job? For example, operatives, ground staff, do they have certificates to use chainsaws, to use spraying equipment? Have you checked the driving licenses so that they can use the ride-on mower or the council van? Same thing with the office staff. Do they know how to use the shredder and all the electrical equipment? This document, this training record, provides the council with an account of what skills the employee is capable of doing, what they're competent at doing, and the employee's signature proves that they agree with that. That is obviously a useful piece of knowledge to know that they are safe. It can also provide the council with evidence in any personal injury claim that they have carried out the training requirements and they haven't acted in a negligent manner. I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for watching today. All that remains to me now is to wish you very best of luck with your recruitment processes and a very good day.